This is Kugan Cassius for iFL TV in association with MGM Marbella. We're at the Matchroom Gym, Elite Gym. With me I've got Barry Hearn. Well, Barry, you couldn't have paid me enough money to get in the ring with Anthony Joshua just then. No disrespect to his sparring partner, but he was absolutely different class.
This is a very, very special project and a very special athlete, and the danger is getting too excited, Coogan, because we've been around the fight game all your life, and you've seen lots of fighters around the world promise much, deliver little. So you don't get carried away, but I've never seen heavyweight with anything approaching the ability this man's got at this stage of his career. Bear in mind, I had 50% of Lennox Lewis for his first 6 or 7 fights with Roger Levitt. He's better than Lennox at this stage of his career. Lennox went on to become one of the all-time greats. So how far can this kid go? There's no limit, but you're actually seeing improvement in small ways every single fight. And apart from the fact that he's a beast, he's an athlete, but he has something really special, and that is exciting for me at my age, for Eddie, because obviously he needs flag bearers, and for British boxing as a whole. I think we're going to have someone to get behind.
I shan't name his sparring partner. I think they like to keep some things confidential, but I've just spoke to him then. He said he hadn't sparred for 4 months, but he wanted to be sort of come back into sparring at the top level, and he certainly does that by coming in with Joshua. Credit to him.
For the sparring partner, all credit, because he's getting money can't buy experience. If you can hold your ground with Anthony Joshua, there's not too many people out there going to give you a worry at this stage of his career. So, it's great experience, and I thought he did a good job. He made Joshua work. He kept his attention, which is all you can ask for. It was a good sparring session. But sparring sessions are what they are, Cougs. They're sparring sessions. They're not the real thing. The real thing's when the head guards come off and you're in a big arena. And for Anthony, on October the 11th, his first belt. And that's a statement on the world stage, not just the domestic stage. So we're at that stage now where the nerves start to jangle because you're moving him up.
There's always this it comes through the social media element of people that want to see Joshua in with Vladimir and Vitaly on the same night, that mentality, but he's had 8 fights, and I think it's important to remember that sometimes. But
well, he hasn't heard the bell for the 4th round. He's had 8 fights against a variety of opponents, all of which came to fight, and all of which have been dealt with in a very professional manner. The social media guys sitting on their armchair or in front of their television eating pizza and drinking beer are great judges of who they want to see, but not necessarily great judges of how you get along this journey. And our responsibility is to make sure it's done professionally. And Tony Sims and the gym here, this is a very elite training squad. It's not like any old gym. This is, I don't say it's palatial, but it's the top end, and for top end fighters, and that's what we've tried to achieve here. So for Anthony now, as a young man, he must be excited about where he is and where he's going. And for me, always in the search of the big buzz and the big fight, I see a lot of nights where I'm going to be very excited.
I've had this debate with a few people on Twitter about his progression, and like I said, the fact that he's only had 8 fights. And the argument I get back is that sometimes in interviews, your son Eddie has sort of said that he'd be ready with, for example, a Tyson Fury or a Derek Chisora now. So they sort of look at that mentality, then they look at who he's facing, and then they sort of counter that argument. So what would you say to that?
Well, there's 2 different ways to look at it. He is ready for Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora now, as he is for pretty well all of the top heavyweights outside of Klitschko. You may want to duck Deontay Wilder for a little while. He's strong, but there's no one out there that you should be frightened of when you've got a fight of the ability of Anthony Joshua. But there's two sides of the coin. There's the economic, the financial side, where you're building a brand as well as a fighter, and there's absolutely no point in taking a risk, no reward fight ratio at this stage of his career. On the one hand, yes, he's got to learn. Of course, he's improving all the time, but he's got to become more famous. Being good in sport, not just boxing, is great, but it's a waste of time unless you're famous as well. Great fighters don't necessarily make great box office. So the only way to build them is constant exposure through the media, through fights, through publicity surrounding fights, and through performances in the ring. And that builds over a period of time, so you can then start arguing that you can get the financial return for a fighter. If you go too early, what do you follow it up with? I mean, if if Anthony was to fight Klitschko tomorrow and win, what does he do the day after? Does he go back to fighting, you know, Price and Fury and Chisora? I mean, it would be seen as a backward step. So you have to build a progression. We're telling everybody a story. The story is Anthony Joshua's story. It's a journey. And we're inviting people to join us on that journey. And while we do so, we will enlarge and exploit the asset that is Anthony Joshua so that he gets the type of financial reward that his talent deserves.
Marketability factor
Yeah.
is spot on. He's got everything going for him to really conquer that part of the, you know, his boxing career, which is, like you said, very important to getting him to where he is, for people to like him, to sort of get that fan base behind him, which he's got a massive fan base already after 8 fights. Obviously, it helped through the Olympic gold medal win as well, but he's got everything in that department as well.
The fan base has got to be enlarged. You see, the boxing fan base is not big enough to sustain boxing hardly. The only way it's really viable in the long term to create superstars and superstar life, Mayweather lifestyle, if you like, to call it that phrase, is to take boxing and the individuals that fight to a much broader audience. Fight fans are great, but I want non-fight fans to recognise Anthony Joshua and to want to go to his fights because they become an occasion when the big man fights, something special. And that's the job that takes the time, because boxing has been, you know, too many times 500, 1,000 people of hardcore fans that will turn up to most shows does not equate with what I'm looking for, which is 1 million home pay-per-view fights. And there's a big gap in that, and it's an exploitation gap that takes time to fill, and that's where a top promoter comes in and does his job with the media, with the social media, with the broadcasters, with the international exploitation, with the syndication, to say to the world, not just the UK, we have something very special here that happens to be British, that happens to come across as an ambassador for boxing as well, as a role model for kids, much more so than just a prize fighter.
Is it too early to say how good he will become?
I don't think you can only speculate, because obviously you can look silly in boxing. You're only ever one punch away from a disaster, as they always say. All you can judge is by what you've learned over the last 30 or 40 years, what you've seen, where you've messed up yourself, where other people have made mistakes, try and learn from them and move on. So at this stage, you know, I look at a fighter with one of the best jabs I've ever seen since Larry Holmes. I see a concussive right hand, and I see hand speed, more important than anything else, for a big man, electric hand speed, you know. And I have to compare him with early Lennox Lewis, early Mike Tyson, early Vladimir Klitschko's, early Vitaly Klitschko's. And I like what I see in comparison, and that's as far as I would want to go. To be in the same conversation as those greats is a marvellous accolade after 8 fights. Now, as I've always said, life, sport, boxing is a game of snakes and ladders. You know, the idea is to go up a lot of ladders and avoid snakes. So far, we haven't hit a snake. We've been going up a lot of ladders, and the ladders are getting easier because he's getting better. So time will tell, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Just finally, how are you going to deal with 100 strong entourage when the mineral water's not right?
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with it?
I'm going to try and deal with it by education in the early days, try and explain how people have messed up their lives, how people have had an opportunity which they've not taken advantage of, how they have to be sensible. And to explain that, you have to be dealing with someone with more than a modicum of intelligence. And fortunately, I can talk one-to-one with Anthony Joshua, and I know I'm talking with someone with a brain as well as ability, and I don't think we'll be having any problems in that department.
I don't think you will either. Maybe the mineral water. As
long as it's fizzy, we'll be fine, Coop.
All right, well, listen, Barry, thanks for giving us your views today on Anthony Joshua. Where are you off to now, Barry?
I think I'll go and make some money somewhere.
Yeah.
As usual, nothing changes, Coog.
Sounds like a plan.
It's a plan.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.